Just turning the recording on. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Emma Gillis. I'm the Library Director at the Pemberton District Public Library, and joining us tonight is Veronica Woodruff, also a Pemberton resident. We're delighted to have you here for our talk this evening on mushrooms, their ecology, identification tricks, and ethical picking. Tonight's event is brought to you as a partnership between the Pemberton Library and Stewardship Pemberton. And I would like to extend my thanks to our guest speaker tonight, Veronica, for hosting and sharing her passion and knowledge about mushrooms. The library and Stewardship Pemberton have partnered on several occasions, so it's great to be able to continue this in a virtual format. We are honoured tonight to be bringing this event to you located on the unceded territory of the Lilwat and St'át'imc nations. And if you are joining us tonight from another area of the province, please do feel free to say hi in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. The chat should just be located down on the bottom of your screen. Before I hand you over to our host, Veronica, I just need to share some housekeeping information with you. So tonight's event is being recorded and the recording can be made available afterwards. For that reason, all video and microphones have been turned off. If you haven't already turned off your video, if I can just ask you to do that. If you do wish to ask questions, please use the chat function. And we will be keeping all the questions until the end of the talk. We are about to do a quick poll. While we're doing the poll, Veronica will get ready to start her talk. And without further ado, thank you, Veronica. And here's just a quick poll just to get an idea of everybody's level of expertise with knowledge with mushrooms. So over to you if you want to take a quick second to fill it out.
Thank you, Emma. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I am outside, so there may be some ambient noise, but this seemed to be the best place to do this from tonight. So thank you, I'm Veronica Woodruff. I'm representing Stewardship Pemberton Society tonight, and we'll see how this poll turns out, but first, sorry, everyone. There we go. Okay, so sorry, I lost my train of thought. Zoom mess up here. I am not an expert. I am certainly a mushroom enthusiast. I've been doing this for about 20 years. If you're adding yourself as an expert, I would expect that you speak mainly in Latin when referring to mushrooms. And I'm not that, but I really, really love the diversity and the amazing treasures that you can find in the forest and all these wonders that come up in the spring and fall and through the summer. So I have been mushroom picking around Whistler Pemberton since about the late 90s when I had a roommate from Bella Coola who showed me how to pick pine mushrooms. And since then, I have learned so much from a whole variety of places, people that are interested in mushrooms, as well as local experts through the Fungus Among Us Festival. That's happening next weekend with the Whistler Naturalist Society. And have really just taken this, this whole study of fungi, and it could be fungi, fungi. We can have a little philosophical discussion on the best way to say that, but it's really just such a valuable experience in my world to go out into the woods and look for mushrooms. So tonight we did talk. We were going to say, yeah, let's talk about the poll. Thanks, Emma. So we're mostly beginners, a couple never done it before, and we've got no experts in the room. So I think that's reasonable. And Emma, I think I can just X that out. That's really interesting. Thanks, everyone. And to be an expert in mushrooms, it's really a study of in motion, because things that I would have said 10 or 20 years ago are definitely different than what I'm going to say tonight, because the study of mushrooms, as we become more scientifically advanced with our methodology, like with DNA, we learn so much more about this incredible kingdom of fungi. So tonight we're going to talk about, oh, sorry everyone, my presentation is stalling. We're going to talk about these two. So basidiomyces and ascomites, these large fruiting bodies of the fungi kingdom, so not the molds and that kind of thing. And I'm not going to talk too much about ecology. We're really going to be talking about the fruiting bodies of these complex organisms. So the fungus is made up of all these really complex parts. So you've got the spores, they're in the soil as these small hyphae, and they start to create these little chains. The hyphae through the soil find one, they find another, that chain grows into a series of mycelium. And that mycelium chain comes together when conditions are right. So you've got the right habitat, you've got the right moisture conditions, and everything is in perfect harmony for that species. This is when that creation of mushroom happens. So you've got that reproductive organism, that fruiting body, so like the seed of the apple in the apple tree, and that's our mushroom, and that's what we're talking about. And I love the complexity. I have resources at the end of this talk about some really good talks and books that if you wanted to learn some more. But Suzanne Simard is a researcher at a UBC. And in her talk, she talks about a single footstep in a forest like this has hundreds of kilometers of mycelium under a single footstep. So that is this complex relationship that's happening under a single footstep that I find so fascinating. Okay, so we're here to learn about identifying mushrooms. And the first place to start really is in the structure and form. So looking at what shape it is. You know, we've got is it a club? Does it have gills? Does it have pores? This is the very first place you want to start when you're identifying mushrooms. And there is a whole range of, as you can imagine, structures of mushrooms in this area. In where we are here, in BC, there's about 10,000 species of mushrooms. And then in Whistler, through the Fungus Among Us, they have, I don't actually know how many they're up to now, but there's no year that the same mushrooms are emerging. So there are mushroom species that have been only known to fruit, say once every 50 years, once every 80 years. And so you'll get this different mix every season, depending on what the moisture conditions are, what the weather conditions are. This particular year, we've had no frost. So mushrooms are pretty wormy because the little flies are all still out. But still, it's been a really good mushroom year. So you don't want to go just by structure. These are two, we've got Liberty caps and a deadly Gallerina photo here, as well as a destroying angel and a pine mushroom. So these are two deadly poisonous mushrooms compared to two mushrooms that people eat in this region. So you don't want to go only on structure alone. But the second most important part about identifying mushrooms is the habitat. So when you look at BC, BC's on a macro level has been split into these different biogeoclimatic zones. So these really broad regional classifications, taking into account elevation, vegetation, species, soil, topography, all that kind of thing. So the reason Pemberton's a really cool place to be is because we're on this intersection of 4 different biogeoclimatic zones. So we've got that really wet coastal zone meeting the interior dry zone, and then we've got the higher elevation coastal zone meeting the higher elevation dry zone. And so we get a really unique mix of mushrooms in the Pemberton region. And that's true not only of mushrooms, but also of bird species, reptiles, amphibians, you name it. Pemberton is really unique across the entire province because of that intersection of biogeoclimatic zones. And then habitat on a micro scale, you really want to be looking at what kind of forest you're in. So are you in a coniferous forest? Are you in a roadside ditch? Is your mushroom growing on a birch tree? Is it growing out of a log? Is it growing out of the ground? These are all really important habitat considerations when trying to identify mushrooms. So the next is a spore print. Before I got into mushrooms too much, I thought that this was something that was more laboratory based and unattainable, but it's actually a really fun craft to do with kids. And it's really fascinating the kind of spore prints that mushrooms can make. So it really is just about taking off the cap of a mushroom and plunking it down on a piece of paper. If you're looking at the material about a specific mushroom that you are trying to identify because you want to eat it, and it says it has a white spore print, then you put that mushroom down on a black piece of paper and you'll see if the spore print is in fact black. Really important. So here's a blue cortinarius mushroom, and you can see this mushroom, the one at the bottom there, it has this cinnamon colored spores of its neighboring mushroom that's blue as spores all over here. And this is the kind of thing that'll make a true mushroom expert belly flop to the forest floor to get a closer look at the cinnamon color spore print. This is a dead man's foot from the Upper Lillooet Road. This is a highly prized puffball mushroom, but not for eating, but for dyeing wools, because it's got this really deep, bright orange spore on the inside of it. These are all wools dyed with different colors of spores from mushrooms. So you can see the range of colors there. So we've got our three. These are the three most important places to start for identifying mushrooms. Color can be really variable within a single species. Smell, super important for some of them. Sound, I had a sound clip, we tested it and it didn't work, but you can look up a microphone and listen to the sounds that mushroom makes. And I love this quote: "A grotesque, scientifically unnecessary, but utterly mind-bending way to eavesdrop on nature." And it really is. So I recommend, if you want to be a dork like me, listen to a microphone. And finally, taste. There are some mushrooms out there that'll be described as having a very peppery taste. So you can take a very small bite and see if it's got some kind of flavor. This, of course, is not recommended with a toxic species. However, any kind of mushrooms, you really need to ingest it to have the toxins circulate through your body. So it's not really that big a deal to take a little bite. You never want to eat wild mushrooms raw because of both because of the toxins, and which in some of the species are destroyed by cooking, and also because of bacteria. If you've got a question, I appreciate that you're raising your hand, but Colin, if you want to ask a question, you can capture it in the chat, and then we'll visit that at the end. So here's my list of the somewhat easily identifiable edible mushrooms in our area. So this list was first, or portions of this list was first presented to me. I should credit Andy McKinnon, who presented over a decade ago at the Mushroom Festival. And this is the list that really got me excited about locally looking for edibles. And so how do I know if this mushroom's edible? This is what people ask me the most about mushrooms. Can I eat it? Can you identify it? Yes, then it's edible. Can you identify it? No, not edible. It's really important that you are able to have confidence that you're going to be eating a mushroom that you've been able to clearly identify. So I'm going to go through that list, and we're going to talk a little bit about the identifying features of each of those mushrooms. So the first one is the pine mushroom, and this is how I got started. These are one of those mushrooms that has a really distinctive smell. It's been described as a mix between cinnamon and dirty socks. And yeah, it is a really unique smell. They grow, they have this relationship with candy stick. And so if you see a candy stick growing like that, they look like that in midsummer before the pine mushrooms come out, you know that you're in a forest that will support pine mushrooms. They are directly connected. They have a mycorrhizal link. Pine mushrooms grow in the moss like this, and they are a really important commercial species and cultural species in the province. And I think they exported, not last year, but the year before, out of Pemberton, they all exported almost 1,000 pounds of pine mushrooms out of Mount Currie from the single buyer. So they're graded when they're bought between number 1s to number 5s, and this would be a number 1, a button, the highest priced pine mushrooms. And so for me, when I'm picking, I usually have a special basket or a bucket in my backpack that holds all my number 1s, because you really don't want to damage those. And this is what you're looking for. You're looking for a little bump in the moss. And it's really important with pine mushrooms that the habitat is maintained. There are reports that people, like in Bella Coola, that people go in with hard rakes and they'll rake back the moss looking for buttons. This is so destructive. And mushrooms are really specific to habitat. So picking mushrooms using destructive practices like that make it so that those mushrooms won't grow there in another year. So that's absolutely not the right way to pick mushrooms. And the other thing is you damage these buttons trying to pick like that. So you want to be really, really delicate. When I'm walking through the woods, I'm really just using the tip of my toe. And is that a rock or is that potentially a mushroom under there? And the pine mushrooms are really quite dense. And I'm going to show you a little video here. So you've picked out your pine mushroom. You really want to replace the habitat and make sure that it is as good or better than how you found it. And so that there's no evidence that you had been there, so pine mushrooms can grow there in the future. And I should say that this is not actually a pine mushroom, for those of you that know. They grow in a very similar way to a Russula species that we're going to talk about with lobster mushrooms, but we call them dippers. So they have a great big dip in the center of them. Those are not pine mushrooms. Those are a different species, but they grow in the similar habitats in a similar way. Okay, on to Shaggy Manes. These are a great beginner mushroom. This was the first mushroom I had enough confidence in my identification, and I brought home, chopped it up, and ate it with butter and salt and pepper, and it was delicious. And the Shaggy Mane that you want to eat is not this inky one here, and maybe not even these brown ones, but the really bright white ones. And that's the case with all wild mushrooms. You really want them to be in the freshest state possible. And so these ones are not very robust. You really want to pick them, bring them home and eat them. They won't last for very long in the fridge. But a really good one. And I like this word, deliquesce. They just melt away, they dissolve. And this looks like a really wimpy mushroom, but these mushrooms were seen pushing up the asphalt at the skate park. So they really have this kind of dual life between the deliquesce and pushing through asphalt. And because they can live on in habitat that is less than ideal, as you can imagine, through asphalt, they can grow in disturbed areas where you want to make sure, and this again, it goes across all mushrooms, that you're picking somewhere where there isn't some kind of contamination, like roadsides where you'd see salt from the highway and that kind of thing. You always want to make sure you're picking from a place that has no evidence of any kind of contamination. So we're having a banner chanterelle year this year. There are chanterelles everywhere, and they are a fairly easy mushroom to identify. They have instead of gills, this is a really good photo of it, they have these veins. This is a golden chanterelle, and the white chanterelle is similar, and they are somewhat unmistakable. This is a mushroom that I was cautious about for a very long time before I actually ate it. It is definitely my favorite mushroom. When picking these mushrooms, if you cut across at the bottom here, instead of picking them out of the dirt, if you bring a knife, then that chanterelle will grow in that exact same spot year after year. And they're absolutely delicious. This is a really great mushroom. And so for probably 10 years, I brought this home and then would compost them before I actually took the step to eat them. But they are one of those mushrooms that you can't really confuse with others. This is a chanterelle that isn't recommended to eat. It used to be on the edible list, now it's off. It's a woolly chanterelle. It does grow with other chanterelles. This is up by Callahan. They have that conical looking cap, and then they've got that kind of rough edges. So not recommended to eat. Won't kill you, but probably give you a little bit of gastrointestinal upset. And these are two mushrooms that can be confused, that people sometimes confuse. These ones will be confused with the winter chanterelle. The woolly spike, again, not poisonous, not really that delicious. And then this is the false chanterelle, which is absolutely should be avoided. Probably won't kill you, but probably won't make you feel that great. And the real difference is if you look closely on the gills, they are very knife-edged. They're very thin, and they're really delicate. So you wouldn't really mix that up from one of the golden or the white chanterelles where they've got the veins versus the really delicate gills. And so delicate gills is what you would see in a button mushroom from the grocery store. Okay, oyster mushrooms. I find oyster mushrooms only in the spring. Sorry, everyone. And only on, I've only found them on alder trees here. They smell like lilacs. Some people describe the smell as anise. They have really, really beautiful smell. They could be confused with angel wings, which again were considered an edible. Angel wings are different from oysters. They have a little bit more of a stem, where oysters are pretty much stuck right to the log that they're on. And angel wings are now on the poisonous list because a number of people at a Japanese wedding died after eating angel wings. So that's a good one to make sure that you've got oysters and not angel wings. So I've included delicious lactarius mostly because of the name, even though reports say that it's not as delicious as it sounds. And it's a really fun mushroom for kids because it does this really cool green staining when it's bruised, and it bleeds orange latex. So mushrooms don't really get much cooler than that when you're a kid. And they are common and they're easy to find. So it's a fun one for kids to learn because of that orange latex and the green bruising. Yep, just reports. I haven't actually eaten one, but the people who have say that they're not as delicious as the name suggests. And they also are prone to be wormy. I have yet to find one that I would eat. The last few years have been really good lobster mushroom years for Pemberton, near close to town, around 1 mile and up at Mackenzie. They are, lobster mushrooms are that russula that looks like the pine, the dipper, that has been parasitized by another mushroom, and it creates this this completely different mushroom, the lobster mushroom. So, and it's a delicious edible. When you cut open a lobster mushroom, you really should see a white interior, and there are a lot of them out there right now. Really good. So you, like the chanterelles and the lobsters, you can cheat and go look at Nestor's Market and see what these look like. Couple of boletes. There's a lot of different species of boletes in the region. This is the porcini, the king bolete. This is found near Callahan. It was really common where I saw one, I saw them everywhere. And this is the admiral bolete, mirabilis, also really, really common. Difficult to find where they're not wormy. And the giveaway is that sponge. So you can see here, the structure is that spongy underside. They don't have gills. Okay, on to morels. Morels will emerge after a fire. And these are pictures of morels that I picked after the Upper Lillooet fire at the Boulder Creek fire in 2015, and the Ashcroft fire of 2017. And I have been surprised, really 2015, well, I guess it was 2016, that year that we picked. Since then, I have been pretty consistent about going to look for mushrooms after a fire, and I generally find them. So if you've got a really good forest that has fir trees and it's burnt, then it's likely that you could find morels. Morels are also really fun for kids. They can pick pounds and pounds of it. The vegetation's all burnt, so it's really easy to walk around, and they're easy to find. Generally, the literature says that the following year after the fire, you'll have morels. The year after that, you'll have about 50%, and then the year after that, you'll have about 30%. But I haven't had much luck finding them the second year. So just only that first year after the fire. And a couple warnings about morels. They don't, for some people, mix with alcohol. This is the case with a lot of edible mushrooms, that some people get an adverse reaction when they drink and eat wild mushrooms. So that's just something to flag. There's a couple different false morels. This is one of them. The difference is the false morel, the cap sits on a thimble. So this cap is not attached, as you can see here. This is a true Morel where the cap, it's hollow on the inside and the cap is attached right to the stem instead of acting like a thimble and a pin. And the false Morel, coming back to that structure, if you're mixing up a Morel and a false Morel like this, you probably shouldn't be picking mushrooms because they're not that close. But this is a deadly, a lot of these false Morels, they can be quite poisonous and almost deadly if you eat them raw. So not recommended. I haven't really found a cauliflower mushroom. I think I found one close to River Runs Through It when I first really started getting into mushrooms. I left it in the woods and I haven't yet to go back to look at the same spot because they will grow again and again in the same spot. The record for cauliflower mushrooms was about 30 pounds until it was upped by a mushroom that was found in France at 63 pounds. So this can get really, really, really big. And from all accounts, it is an incredibly delicious edible. It's found all through the Lower Mainland, Vancouver Island, Queen Charlotte Island, so all through the coast. So keep your eye out for the cauliflower mushroom. Could potentially be confused with a Ramaria. We have a lot of different corals here. Apparently most of them edible, not incredible. There's no real record of people being poisoned or dying from corals. But again, similar to a false Morel, if you're mixing up a Ramaria and a cauliflower, you really shouldn't be picking mushrooms, but just thought to flag it. And then Combs tooth. This is in Pemberton, right in the valley. Often see them. I've only actually seen them in Cottonwood here. And I've seen them in Whistler, River Runs Through It. They're really, really good edible. And my colleague who loves this mushroom, has been eating it for years and years, has recently developed just an adverse reaction. So this can also happen with wild mushrooms over time, that you eventually, your body just decides it doesn't like to eat this mushroom. This is still a great mushroom for me to eat. I really, really enjoy it. Really mild flavor, easy to find. And you really only want to eat it when it's bright white like that. Another really good edible, this is a mushroom that wins best mushroom when you have taste tests, the hedgehog. It's found, if you're finding chanterelles, you may likely find hedgehogs. They do grow in similar habitats, and I found them together. And a really, really good, unmistakable edible. You can see that it has these teeth, different from gills or sponge, so really unmistakable. I aspire to find a lion's mane in my life. I have not to date, and apparently is just one of the most delicious mushrooms out there. And I have heard reports of them growing south of us, and then of course on Vancouver Island, but I have no reports of them growing locally in Pemberton. So if you did see one, I would just be delighted to hear that they are here. This is Chicken of the Woods. I found this one in Princess Louisa Inlet in August, and it was in perfect condition. Of course, you're not allowed to pick from provincial parks. And this is another one I found near Mount Meager that I was quite excited. That's the first one I've ever found. I was really excited. Dove right in for a smell and to feel the texture, and I thought it was going to drop dead. It smelled so bad. It was like a chicken left in a freezer for a month that was not plugged in. So you, again, really need to eat these ones when they're in good condition, and they have been seen locally. Okay, puffballs. It is a banner puffball year. They are everywhere right now. They are all edible. Ooh, someone's writing. And you really can't mistake a puffball. They have no structure in the center of the mushroom. And if you did mistakenly pick something that wasn't a puffball, you would see that there's some mushroom structure growing. So it's some kind of immature. This is a fly agaric mushroom, Amanita. So you would see that structure coming. So the best thing to do, you're having friends over, you've picked all these wild mushrooms, you're 99.99% confident in your ID. And just serve it up separately. Allow your guests to choose if you want to try the morels or the lobsters or the combs tooth without forcing your guests to do so. Okay, I like this book here, Mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest. I do have this as part of my list at the end there, but they have a really good recommendation what you have when you're cooking wild mushrooms the first time, for one for the pot and one in the fridge for the doctor, just in case. Okay, so back to the, is this mushroom edible? Can you identify it? Yep, perfect. It's absolutely edible. Can you identify it? No, it's not edible. A lot of people will bring, you know, their friends' mushrooms. Oh yeah, for sure, this is what it is. But you really do want to be sure what you're eating out of the woods. So I don't know if you can notice, but I really try not to put slides that have words on them, but I thought I would because we're talking about poisonous mushrooms. So people react differently to mushrooms, including edible ones and toxic ones. So somebody who maybe has an unknown condition, kidney condition, liver condition, sometimes these mushrooms can really react differently. Some mushrooms react with alcohol. The status of edibility can change. That's like those angel wings. They were considered a good edible. They now are considered on the poisonous level because they have killed a few people. Some, depending on the toxin, and all mushrooms, all of the toxic mushrooms have different vectors of toxin. So it's not just mushrooms are toxic in this way. They're all very different. And you can get symptoms within 5 minutes, or you can get symptoms 2 weeks later. So just be aware that the symptoms aren't going to come on immediately. They can actually linger and cause more systemic organ failure long-term if you've eaten the wrong mushroom. And then geographically, this is different from what you might have seen in Ontario or in France or California. So just keeping an eye out in different regions. And so this is the fly agaric. This is that, when I showed you, this is that quintessential toadstool, really, really beautiful mushroom. We have some years where these are everywhere. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, we had a year that they were just about everywhere. These mushrooms don't really look like any of the edibles we've talked about tonight, except this is a sculpted puffball here, and this is a really immature fly agaric. So you can see how they're a little bit similar. But again, if you're going back to that structure and you've cut them open, you can see if you thought you've had a puffball, cut it open and it's got the beginnings of gills, you know you had the wrong mushroom. The death cap is another, this one has been responsible for some truly unfortunate deaths in a young person, and also some really hospitalizations, long-term hospitalizations. And it is being found more often in Vancouver and Victoria. And so this is a poster from the Vancouver Mycological Society that has put out this poster about the death cap, because it does look like some other field mushrooms in Asia that resemble it. You can also see the one poisoning from Victoria in that last slide is because a gentleman thought he was eating a puffball. Again, you cut open a puffball, it should never have the start of gills. This is a poisonous mushroom that may kill you. That you can see, here's our bolete. Here's the tricholoma, the tiger tricholoma. But you can see when we go back to the structure, if you cut open the tricholoma here, it would have gills, and our boletes have pores. So totally different structures. And so if you are going through your key and you make sure that you're looking at the right structures, you would never confuse these two in the kitchen. This little guy is all around Pemberton. I saw it this morning. It's on the Valley Trail loop. It is a small nondescript mushroom, and it's deadly poisonous. And there's very few mushrooms that are deadly. And, you know, many of them will make you sick, but this happens to be one that's really common. And again, to die from this, you would have to eat it. It's not about handling it or anything like that. It's really, you need to ingest it, any mushroom to have the toxins react. So some people are interested in magic mushrooms. I'm not going to talk about that too much. It is a drug and it's illegal to be in possession of. Also illegal to trespass onto people's property to try and get them. But they do grow around here as liberty caps. And fair warning that they are in this group of mushrooms called LBM. So these little brown mushrooms, and they're hard to tell apart. So you've got these, and they do grow together. So if you've got big patches of what you think are liberty caps, you better make sure that every single mushroom you're picking is a liberty cap and you don't have a couple deadly gallerinas in the mix. So just wanted to give a word of caution about that. And when I did this talk at the library, we actually had a couple guys get up and leave right after that slide. So I wonder if they had to go throw their chocolates out of the freezer or something. And so here's some resources for you. That talk, the TED Talk, Suzanne Simard, she's wonderful. She did research on how the mycelium networks are really communication networks, not only between similar species or the same species, like you know, Doug fir to baby Doug fir, but also between species. So Doug fir connects to maple and you know, maple to hemlock. So that network of mycelium is just so much more than just mushrooms. And then Paul Stamont's interesting citizen scientist who, and a lot of the work that's being done with mushrooms and transforming like toxic waste into usable soil. And these are great books. I love this Mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest. And of course, David Aurora's books are really great. And it's really, really great to have a good book. I like the Mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest because it has, it's plain language in its intro, and it's got a really good description of all the toxins. And then if you're a beginner, these little pamphlets are really great. You can get them at like a lot of the outdoor clothing stores and also at Armchair Books. They're a really good, simple guide to poisonous local mushrooms and edibles. I just discovered the Pacific Northwest Mushroom Identification Forum. So this has like changed my wasted time suck of Facebook into this really great mushroom resource where people are willing to identify, and it appears to be very serious people about taking mushroom identification seriously. So if you have a mushroom that you're interested in having identified, they have very strict instructions on how to send a photo in to get it identified. It's really, really great. There's other larger, more global forums, but it seems like most people are just looking for magic mushrooms and looking to get their confirmation for their magic mushroom picks. iNaturalist, awesome for mushrooms. It's really, really good. It tells you what mushrooms it could possibly be based on the, you know, the color, the photo, or what has been seen locally. And then finally, the Audubon guide is one that I use because it's available offline. So it's always good to have a field guide on your phone in the woods. And I just want to encourage you to get out there. It's not just about the mushrooms, but really that whole incredible network. It's so it's such a good way to connect into the forest. And once you start seeing past, you know, oh, can I eat this one? And you just start appreciating all the, sorry, I'm outside, all the different colors and structures and all the interesting things that are in the woods. Great way to connect both for yourself and your family. And this is my pine mushroom and my face when I see the first one of the year. Yeah, that's really the last slide that I had to tell you about. This is definitely a lot of information. I see there's a lot in the chat. Emma, I don't know if we want to take some questions. I don't know if there has been any.
Yeah, I've got a couple here. Let me. Hi. I've just jotted down a couple. So the first one was Amanda wanted to know about the jelly mushroom.
Oh, like, yeah, the witch's butter. Or there's a few different ones. There's the witch's butter, which is, I had a picture of the orange one there. Or there is the spirit bear. It's like a white jelly mushroom. There's a whole bunch of different ones. I remember one of the first mushroom talks I went to was with white jellies, and who was it? Anyways, the presenter was saying, you know, it's really delicious if you dip it in honey. It tastes like honey. So yeah, I don't know. Is that the one? Maybe is it the orange one or the white one?
I'll see if she replies in the chat.
Okay.
Matthew, I wanted to know how you tell the difference between angel wings and the oyster mushroom.
The oyster mushroom really has, well, first get yourself a really good guide. The angel wings is a bit more of a stem, and the oysters are attached right to the log. So that's a really good way. It's just that structure of how they're attached. And oysters, you know, I don't know if we see oysters in the fall. I usually see them in spring through the summer. I don't really see oysters that much in the fall.
Pina would like to know if you've eaten the white sheep polypore. I hope I'm correct.
No, I haven't. You know, polypores, like the chicken in the woods, it kind of, yeah, it seems like an adventure. I haven't yet. Though really the ones that I've put up here today are all the ones that I have eaten. So there's many out there that are edible, but these are the ones that I have eaten.
Claire wanted to know if the morels were in a hole. Do you need to dig them?
No, morels I cut. So, but they do, so you get a forest fire go through, especially some of those high intensity burns, and they actually burn these holes because they've burnt the root structure underneath. And the morels seem to like it. They seem to come up in these dense pockets in those habitats variations in the forest fire. So I always look, if you've got a little burnt root area, I always look in there because they do seem to tend to like some kind of structure.
And Natalie had also asked where they typically appear after a fire.
Where? Well, it comes to habitat. So if I see a forest fire, you know, I have found them in a forest that was probably 40 years old, so a replanted forest. But the older, the better. So, you know, Doug fir. This is, and I'm speaking from experience with here, both in Pemberton and say up towards Loon Lake. It was always Doug fir. We always had Doug fir there. So,
Dominica would like to know about the slippery jack.
Well, slippery jacks are good. I had a good friend that I trusted from Vancouver Island that gave me a bunch of dried slippery jacks that were delicious. I have not seen slippery jacks here, but they are all over Vancouver Island. But that's not to say they're not here. I just haven't noticed them.
Julia wants to know the name of the puffball that is good for dyeing yarns.
Oh, dead man's foot. Yeah, so that's a whole other. So I didn't talk about mushrooms, other functions like using spores for dyes or for health effects, that kind of thing. So for taking mushrooms as supplements, but there's a whole other talk in there about those two topics.
Britt wonders if oysters grow in the same tree year after year.
Good question. I don't know. I'm trying to think of all the oyster trees that I know. I always find them on the side of a river, usually really, really close to a river. And it's usually, we are either paddleboarding or jet boating. So I rarely go back to those same trees. So.
We've got a few more.
Okay.
Stefan would like to know the best time to pick pine mushrooms and at which elevation.
Sure, that's a good question. Pine mushrooms are cool because you can have a really long year. So last year, you know, I think we had such a crappy spring last year. I found pine mushrooms in every month starting in July. So I found pine mushrooms on, what's the name of that trail? Up by the cell tower in July, and then nothing for a while. And then, so it's just, it is really random when they come up. Sometimes they're at the top of the Duffy. A really good indicator, the mushroom buyer, she says that if the peony gets rained out, it's going to be a great pine mushroom year. So if the peony, so late August, you get lots of rain, pine mushrooms should start 2 to 3 weeks later. And my birthday's in the middle of September, and I have found pine mushrooms on my birthday high up in the Duffy, say around like Mount Roar trail there. But then I've also found them lower down, usually lower elevation down Pemberton Way. They come later. So I usually start higher elevation and then I work my way down to town over, say, 6 weeks. And they will last through a frost. I'm really hoping we get a frost, because I found probably 40 the other day, and most of them are wormy. So right now the little flies are really laying the eggs in the pines, making them wormy, and you can't sell the wormy ones.
Monica's got a great question. She wants to know if you've any tips for ethical picking. You've mentioned leave the habitat intact with pine mushrooms, but is there a better way to pick the mushrooms to minimize the impact on the environment?
That's a really great question. And so, this is with all things in the woods, you know, you just really want to reduce your impact. There is I have heard from people that you want to make sure that leave as much of the spores out there as possible. So give them a little tap, let the spores be out there. Specific mushrooms like morels and chanterelles, you just want to cut, because then, or oysters for that matter. So you're not actually like tearing them up from the habitat they're in, you're so leaving no trace. And yeah, that's pretty much, pine mushrooms are just one of those ones that you want to wiggle out to get the stem right out, but then making sure that you repack that habitat. Because I have seen people, the other thing about mushrooms, when you go in the woods, you kind of just see these mushrooms that people are like, what's this? What's this? And they're just kind of hucked all over the forest. And, you know, they are really providing a function. It may be a function that's mysterious to us as humans, but they are performing some function. And so leave the mushrooms intact. And yeah, so hopefully that's the answer. It's really just about maintaining that habitat.
Matthew's asked about chanterelles. He found a lot yesterday, but hasn't been able to identify a few of them. He can't fully tell with the gills. Is there another way of ensuring the real from fake?
There's a couple of ways. Chanterelles, when you break them apart, so if you've cut it in half, you could peel the stem and it's like string cheese. So that's another giveaway for chanterelles. So the goldens and the whites, the stem is like string cheese.
Stefan would like to know if the skin of a slippery jack is bad. Should they be removed?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know that question. I don't know the answer. I feel like I should look it up, but because it's not a mushroom I pick regularly, I don't want to give you the wrong advice.
Monica has asked, when picking lobster mushrooms, do you need to be wary of what is growing around it, such as a poisonous mushroom that could cause the lobster to also be poisonous?
I haven't heard about proximity poisoning. Like, so, you know, there are some plants that have that, like a hellebore, where if, you know, a cattle is grazing the grass next to a hellebore, it could be toxic. But the other thing about lobsters is the concern is that parasitic fungus that has parasitized that Russula could parasitize a different species. So that is a poisonous species. I think that's what the concern is. If you are picking a lobster mushroom, you're cutting it in half, the inside is white. I think that it would be okay to eat. Yeah, I don't think that you'd get proximity poisoning from mushrooms. And that's big, I don't think. So that is not a definite answer, but I haven't read anything about proximity poisoning.
Lisa would like to know what it means when there are a lot of mushrooms around. Is it the sign of a healthy ecosystem, and what makes for a bumper year?
Yeah, it's all about the moisture, I think. And I have heard different theories at Fungus Among Us Festival, which by the way is next weekend. So there's going to be virtual talks on Friday and a whole bunch of other activities from the Whistler Naturalists. And the things that I heard a theory there many years ago that someone said, well, you know, I think if mushrooms have 1 year and they just let it all out and you get the banner mushroom year, there's mushrooms everywhere, and then they're tired. They need to store up more energy. So it may be another year, they need to have a break, and then the following year they'll have more. I've heard that same person say, I don't think that was right. I think that it really is dependent on moisture. So how much rain, I would say moisture for the mushrooms in our area in Pemberton here on that cusp of the coast to interior. I wouldn't say that about morels, but for most of the mushrooms that I've talked about, it's all about that rain. So you get a banner year when you've got lots of moisture, and it's moisture early. So that huge rain we had in August, and then we had a really big rain in September, that's enough to really saturate the forest. And I think that's what gives us the banner years. And it's really interesting to see some species just take off. Like this year, the puffball years, there's just puffballs everywhere. And I'm assuming that because we haven't had frost either, that's a lot of different mushrooms that are really thriving right now. Some of our mushrooms are good at growing after a frost, but many aren't.
We have another slippery jack question. Dominica would like to know about the blue staining slippery jack. Weren't sure if they could take them.
Oh, I feel like I should look up slippery jacks for you guys. Like I said, it's not one of my go-tos, so I don't really know. I'm sorry about slippery jack, folks.
Magali has asked if there's is it chaga, C-H-A-G-A? Mm-hmm. Are there any in Pemberton?
I don't know.
And what's the pine mushroom situation in Squamish? Britt would like to know.
Good question. I haven't seen pine mushrooms further south than Callahan, but that's not to say they're not there. But you're really getting into coastal forest when you're creeping down towards Squamish. You've completely left that overlap between interior biogeoclimatic zone. So, you know, that being said, there's pines on the island. So I don't know. That is a good question. I haven't seen them. Habitat's completely different. You know, you're not getting those big Doug firs, hemlocks. You've got a lot more cedar. I don't know.
Junichi, I hope I've said that right, wants to know, are there any other mushrooms you're most likely to find when looking for pine mushrooms?
Dippers. Those russulas with a dip in the middle, those are everywhere all the time, thwarting your efforts. They grow with pine mushrooms everywhere, and you get really excited, and then you barely even need to touch the moss. You just put your finger in and be like, oh, there's a dip. It's definitely not a pine mushroom. So the other thing, the giveaway is that candy stick. So you can, if you see the candy stick, you know you have pine mushrooms because they are directly linked with mycelium. So.
Okay, I think that's it. I think that's all the questions.
Amazing.
A few people have asked about if this will be available as a recording. We are currently hopefully recording it, technology all being well. So we should be able to share that recording for anyone that's interested. But yeah, thank you so much, Veronica, for sharing your time and wisdom with us tonight. It's definitely been a different experience taking this online, but it's been fascinating. I've learned a lot, especially now that I'm out walking in the woods with my 5-year-old. For those of you that have joined us tonight, I hope you found it really informative and interesting too. And Veronica may want to speak to this, but we are working on We are working on doing some other talks in the coming weeks and months. So I would encourage you to follow the library on Facebook or sign up for our newsletter just to stay up to date with that and get the registration information. I don't know if you want to speak to any of the potential talks.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, we are going to be talking about, we did a landscapes talk about Mount Meager and flood risk in Pemberton and landslide risk and forest fire risk. So basically all the big natural hazard risks. And we're going to be doing a talk like that again, paired with a community research project. So look for that coming, and yeah.
Thank you, Veronica. And thank you, everyone. Enjoy all your mushroom adventures.
Great. Thanks, everybody, so much.